I remember early on in my time in the Missionaries of God's Love, I was in one of our classes, I don't remember which one, and the priest who was teaching us, he said, when he was studying, he said, a priest or a bishop said to me, most homilies, and this probably isn't true of the homilies you hear here at St Declan's or at St Joseph's, right? But he said most homilies can be summarised into two words: try harder. Try harder. And I remember going, I think that's right. That gelled with my experience, and I kind of took it a bit further in my head, and I thought about it for a little while, and I thought, not only is that what I hear in homilies a lot, but it's often I feel that's what we all kind of, at least what I kind of think about when I think about what it means for me to live my life as a Christian and as a Catholic. That often I can think, well, it's all just about trying harder. That if I just, pray that extra rosary or read that extra book or love that person who maybe requires that little bit extra love and that sort of stuff, if I just do that when I work really hard and sort of grit my teeth and sort of white-knuckle my way through it, so I used to almost think it was like I'd get to this point, if I just did that for long enough, if I just tried harder for long enough, I'd kind of reach this saturation point, that almost like this switch would flick over and it would go from being a Christian would be really hard, so then going, this is all nice, and I've figured it out, and I've cracked the code, I've figured out the secret sauce, etc., etc. That you think, and I remember thinking, I've just got to try harder and do it all in my own strength, then eventually it'll kind of settle in. I don't know if anyone's had that experience of going on a long run, and once you get to, K4 or 5 or something, you sort of settle into the run, it gets a little bit easier, so I've heard, right? I remember thinking, maybe my faith's a little bit like that. That we can have this experience where we think, really, my job as a Catholic is just to try that little bit harder. And then if I do that well enough, then God will kind of be happy with me. And what we end up doing is we try harder, we do more things, it gets harder, and the more we try harder, the harder it tends to get. And we keep going, it gets kind of exhausting, right? Then we come into church today on this lovely Sunday morning, and we hear Jesus tell us what he says in the gospel. Well, you've heard it said this, but I say this. I know I've had moments when I've read this gospel and I've gone, come on, man, seriously? Like, it was hard enough already. And now you're saying, well, it's not just here, you're raising the bar. It can feel like Jesus is raising the bar to go to a whole nother level. I'm thinking, I had enough trouble passing the bar when it was here, let alone going kind of higher up as we go. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I don't know, maybe if you had that experience listening to the gospel, maybe it's just me and you guys are all kind of okay, right? But we can think and we can go, oh my goodness, there's more that I've got to do. And it can get exhausting. It can be so tiring because we're busy with the kids or the family or work or uni or school or whatever it is. And just think, this is so hard. And I'm trying really hard and it's just kind of difficult, right? And if you've ever had that experience, and maybe if you've ever read that gospel or listened to that gospel and thought something a little bit similar to me, then what I want to say to us today, and what I think Jesus is telling us today is this: that Jesus isn't raising the bar. He's changing the question. Jesus isn't raising the bar, but he's changing the question. And it's that first line that he says that is the key that unlocks everything that flows from that in this passage. That he says, if your virtue goes no deeper than the scribes and the Pharisees, then you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. He's not saying if you don't do more than the scribes and Pharisees. No, he's saying if your virtue goes no deeper than the scribes and the Pharisees. Because the reality is the scribes and the Pharisees, they live on this surface level. For them, it's all about the external action. What happens on the surface? Below the surface, beneath the surface, they're kind of rotten to the core, right? Jesus calls them elsewhere in Scripture. He says, you guys are like whitewashed tombs. You're pristine on the outside, but you're dead on the inside. That Jesus is changing the question. What he's saying is it's not about external compliance, but about internal transformation. Because we can look at the Pharisees and on face value, on the surface level, they're disciplined, they're committed, all the external stuff lines up. But Jesus wants more than just the externals. He wants more than just the surface level. He wants more than just routine commitment. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and this guy was sharing a bit about his conversion story, and he said it got to this point where he was sitting and he was hashing this out with his wife, and they went back and forth, and it got a little bit kind of tense, and he said, "I'm committed to you," he said to his wife. And his wife in that moment, she said, "Bob, I don't want your commitment. I want your devotion." And this hit him like a ton of bricks, and he realized in that very moment that as much as she was saying that to him, he realized God was saying that to him as well. That God didn't just want his commitment, but he wanted his devotion. Because it's easy to live committed lives on the surface, to be seen to do kind of the right thing. And we can do that kind of on our own strength for a little bit, right? But eventually what we realize is it's not enough to really satisfy that longing in our hearts. It's not fulfilling. We realize that Jesus wants more, and we're made for more than just the surface commitment. That he doesn't just want our commitment, he wants our devotion. And what's the difference? Well, commitment is about, I can fulfill my obligations. I can do what's required. I can do the tasks that are laid before me, but it stays kind of in this cerebral, mental kind of thing. It's an activity of the brain. Whereas devotion is something different. It says, I belong to you. I love you. I give myself to you. It's a matter of the heart. That where commitment is a matter of the mind, devotion is a matter of the heart. And Jesus doesn't want us to stay on the surface, unchanged and untransformed, trying harder in our own strength to follow the rules, doing our best to not sin, etc. Because there's more to following Jesus than just not sinning. If all we think being a disciple is not singing, well, that's kind of pretty boring, and you're going to get bored really quickly, and you're going to find it really difficult at the same time. Now, I'm not saying go out there and sin, right? But what I'm saying is there's something more. Because Jesus wants us to be transformed, to be radically changed interiorly at the level of the heart, so that not only would our actions change, but our hearts themselves would be transformed. That love and joy and peace and kindness and gentleness and patience and goodness and faithfulness and self-control would flow from our hearts. That Jesus doesn't want to stay on the surface with us. He wants to go deeper. And the way he wants to do this is by encountering us and loving us and being in relationship with us. That is inviting us to open ourselves to a renewed encounter, to allow him into our lives and our hearts. Put simply, all he's asking is that we would let him love us. That's it. Just let him love us. Just to say yes to his love for us and to receive it. That's it. So perhaps the question before us this week is not how can I try harder? But rather the question might be, well, where is Jesus inviting me to go deeper? Where is he asking me to trust him and to let him love me in my life at the moment? Where is he calling me from surface commitment into deeper, real devotion? So as we enter into the Eucharist this morning, let's have the courage to invite Jesus in a deeper way. And let's have the courage simply to come before him and say, Jesus, I want to let you love me. To bring your love to life in me and bring me to that interior transformation that your heart is for me. Amen.